there, and welcome to Personalization Point, Episode 8, When You Shouldn't, dun dun dun, personalize. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump in, if you do me a favor, go ahead and go to the website at flipthescript.co and make sure you download the deck before we jump into this session so that you have it for reference. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump into the content. So let's start with a bit of an agenda. When you shouldn't personalize. When you just don't like money. Just kidding. Okay, the agenda. We're going to start off with, number one, a bit of a review, and then we're going to go through cases 1 through 10. There are 10 in total where you shouldn't personalize. At least from my perspective, you shouldn't personalize. So let's start with a bit of a review. So in review, personalization is defined as anything that's designed to meet someone's individual requirements. So this is going to be individual, one-to-one messaging that you cannot segment or repeat to another. There are 5 different buckets: self-authored content that they author themselves, post articles, webinars, etc. Engaged content, number 2, that they didn't author themselves, but they engage with, they liked, shared, or commented. 3 is self-identified traits, their profile line, headline, or company line. Their About Me section on LinkedIn. Number 4 is junk drawer, which is basically any of their personal interests, hobbies, stuff that's non-work related, and then company level data. This arguably could be relevance, but it is personalized to that person's company and it's one line in specific. So it can't be repeated to different companies. So that's why it's kind of a gray area. So bucket 5, this works the least effective, at least in my experience, because it's about someone's company, not about them. But blogs, posts, website language, etc. if you can't find anything. So really personalization is anything that is one-to-one. Relevance is anything that is one-to-many. So demographic relevance, firmographic relevance, technographic relevance are the top 3. Demographic being, someone's, it's a way to segment to someone usually within the B2C market. But for this case scenario, it would be buyer persona is how I see people do demographic relevance or segmentation. Number 2 is firmographic, so industry segment or vertical. And then number 3 is technographic, based on tech stack. So relevance, again, is going to be one-to-many. And arguably, that's what marketing is, right? Is one-to-many, whereas sales should be one-to-one. So that is just the definition. But the first case scenario that I would not personalize. There are several cases scenarios. Obviously, there are 10. So let's start from the top. The first and number 1 overarching case scenario is I would not personalize if you're getting the results that you want from relevance only. Who am I, right? So if you are getting the results that you want, if you're hitting quota and you're getting a ton of meetings and you're, etc., if you're killing it, I wouldn't stop. I proactively wouldn't stop you. So I've worked with a lot of companies where I basically say like, hey, if you're a rep on the SDR team, and you are at quota without, any level of personalization, please do not start doing it. Don't stop what you're doing. Continue to do what you're doing and keep killing it, because I would never, never, ever, for ego's sake, get someone to do something whenever what they were doing pre-existing. I'm not going to mess up, something that's being successful. So the first case scenario and number 1 case scenario is if you're getting the results from relevance, I would log out a personalization point and I would never look back until you aren't getting the results that you want. So that's the first case scenario. Number 2, you're primarily selling B2C. So B2C, even though personalization is more effective, at least in my experience, your quote unquote book rate has to be much higher. You have to sell to 300 people or 400 people or 500 people, or you're selling Coca-Cola or, etc. If you're selling B2C, you simply don't have the time to spend any level of personalization, true one-to-one, because you are you have to book a high amount of meetings because the ACV is super low, typically with B2C. So B2B, I would do it because usually a meeting quota is hovering anywhere from 10 to, on the very, very high end, 20 meetings for SDRs. If you're selling B2C, I'd say it's impossible to do personalization. Number 3, you're selling to a very offline buyer. And what I mean by very offline buyer is like offline buyer. So I do not mean back-end engineers. I do not mean CFOs. They are online. They are on LinkedIn. I have checked. I have sold into them. These are a couple of examples of what I mean by offline buyer, that they are not on LinkedIn. Doctors, farmers, lawyers, teachers, etc. Some of these actually arguably are online. So I would have said farmers until I talked to a farming company a couple of weeks ago, and they said, actually, I said, well, of course you wouldn't do personalization in your case. And they said, actually, we tried out what you were saying and it worked for us. So I don't know what to say other than I would scratch farmers out from this list. So I'd say doctors, lawyers, and teachers, but I mean severely offline buyer, meaning they have no presence on LinkedIn. Because even if they aren't active on LinkedIn, meaning they aren't, doing engaged content, they aren't engaging with content overtly, they aren't, writing any content themselves, you got to keep in mind, it's like for a lot of posts, you'll see 20,000 views and you'll get 30 likes. And everyone thinks that it did pretty well because they got 30 likes. You got to keep in mind, 19,970 people looked at it and didn't like it. So let's put aside the existential conundrum on what that means. But know that there's a lot of people who are very active online in terms of scrolling through, but don't actually say anything. So I think that most social media has actually turned into that, is people not actually engaging, but people still taking a look. So I'd say, there's a lot of buyers who are looking at LinkedIn, who aren't actually saying things necessarily on LinkedIn. So that gives you an opportunity of they are checking their inbox, and you can use, anywhere from junk drawer premises, schools that they attended, certainly company data, but their About Me section or headline or profile line by code, you can use those. So I'd say the only example here would be someone who is just not on LinkedIn. So for instance, I'm actually not going to give you the instance because it's into a point a little bit later. I'm going to bait you there. But hypothetically, offline buyers, I have never sold into these buyer personas, so I don't know. But these are a couple that would come to mind for me. Number 5, active God. So an active God sequence is basically when something that happens to a mass group of people that changes their need or for a certain product. I'll give you an example. COVID just hit, Zoom skyrocketed. It wasn't all of a sudden, sorry Zoom if you're watching, it wasn't all of a sudden that they got insatiably better at selling. There was something that pivoted all schools and all, companies into a remote selling or remote learning environment across the globe. So all of a sudden, if I were Zoom, I wouldn't be spending the time to personalize messaging because people just need my product. They just need my product, and all I need to worry about is getting in front of as many people as I can, with great, high quality messaging in terms of relevance and the right tones, but getting in front of those people and making it easy for them to buy my product. So Eric Yuan did a really great job of that. I know he wrote a letter. Sorry, I'm getting chills even thinking about the letter. He wrote a letter, basically talking about how he didn't foresee what would have happened during the pandemic, and he was trying to do as well as he could. And I think Zoom did a wonderful job. But an active God sequence is going to be something that drastically changes the desire and needs of the market for your product. So if I was selling Charmin toilet paper around March of 2020, all of a sudden I would be splitzing out relevant message only, because I need to be, they're looking to buy water. They are in the desert. All I need to make sure is I get in front of as many people as I can, because I know that their desire alone, not my selling ability, is going to make the difference on whether I hit quota. 5, very similar to 4, is going to be the demand is unrulingly high for your product. So again, this is going to be not that many case scenarios. I mean, I'm thinking through, there's an insatiable product market fit, and we're just trying to start, keep the hemorrhage of all of the leads that are coming in. But I have a feeling if you're watching a video like this, that is not the case. And it's not the case in most of our cases, So if the demand is unruly high for your product, then I'd say I wouldn't take the time to personalize. I would, again, just be blitzing out as many messages as I can. And it would be all about volume, because I don't need to necessarily know who my buyer is for them to want me. If I'm in the desert, and I have 6 bottles of water or 600 bottles of water, like it's not about me selling the water effectively and digging for pain. It's just about finding the person and getting the water over to them. Number 6, there's a high immediance that with a fast approaching expiration date with a high volume of people. So let's give an example. Let's say, for instance, the things that I'm thinking about when I'm defining the results of sequences or defining the prioritization of them is I'm thinking about when is the expiration date for the sequence. So content downloads, webinar registrants, event attendees, you go to an event normally and like you're super hyped up and you're ready to buy and you're ready to do the thing and you're ready to lose weight. And when you're walking out the door and then like 3 days later, you're still into it, but you're not that into it. And then like 2 weeks later, it's like everything's back to normal. So if there is a fast approaching expiration date and you have a high amount of people, let's say, for, an event attendee, for instance, and you don't have the team to basically be sending out all this messaging, and it's like, okay, they're going to lose track of when the event was, and I don't have the bandwidth in terms of team, then I'm going to blitz out the best relevant messaging that I have because I simply just don't have the time. So this includes, as in points 4 and 5, this includes basically some level of expiration date of, this cake is going to go bad if I don't eat this cake. So I better go ahead and eat this cake now and not worry about the timing. Number 7, you sell for a very regulated vendor. So I have worked with companies and I stand corrected that they essentially are so compliance and security heavy that they cannot go off script from a compliance perspective. So I'm not going to certainly not name any names and certainly not any industries, but I think through if I'm not asking like, does my marketing team want me to go off brand? I actually have been pleasantly surprised that enterprise companies that I said, well, you guys are very secure, like you guys are very, you want to be tied to make sure that you're on brand. And they're like, actually, we have more agility than you think. And I've stood corrected by multiple enterprise companies. But I'd say if I'm selling in a very regulated industry or to a very regulated industry, I'd be thinking about, not from the can I maintain consistency in terms of flow, feel, technique, et cetera, which you can do within personalization, but literally can I not say a certain amount of words, otherwise I'm going to get fined, sued, et cetera. And then I'd be thinking, okay, personalization is probably not the route for me. Number 8, you have to keep reps 100% on brand for messaging. So this is a quip for the SDR leaders who are out there, or AE leaders who are self-prospecting. So if you must keep your reps on brand, like finitely to the T in terms of wording, then I'd say I haven't seen many cases of this where it's very stringent. Then okay, I wouldn't say personalization, but my argument would be, even though we want to keep brand feel in mind, when people normally use this as a reason to not personalize, the SDR leaders end up writing the sequences anyway, and they don't go to marketing and get everything approved. And even if they did, I have seen too many people, let reps create their own sequences. So they create all these own sequences. So essentially we didn't personalize because we wanted to make sure that we were on messaging. And then not only do I have an SDR leader who's not necessarily thinking about brand messaging and it's not being approved, but I have a whole bunch of reps who are creating a whole bunch of sequences. So now they are off messaging at a higher scale. So we didn't get the results from personalization at the sake of we wanted to stay on brand, and they certainly didn't they stayed on brand the same amount as if they would have personalized. So in this case scenario, I'd say you have to stay on brand, like it's mandated from the marketing department or C-level down, that you cannot go anything off quote unquote script. Then I would say, okay, that this is the messaging for you. I will say I was talking to a 10,000 person team, not company, team the other day, and they were talking all about how they don't want their reps to sound on script, how they want them to be creative and be themselves on the phone because there is no linear path. There's structure, but there's not script. So essentially, I would position that before I move on here. Number 9, you are selling internationally. I'm not saying that personalization does not work in other countries other than the US. I actually have sold in EMEA, for instance, and they demand personalization, much more so than the US. New Zealand, another, Australia, AUNZ. I have sold and had teams in those regions, and they actually are very, by code and nature, about quality and personalization and relationship. However, I do not have the temerity to sit up here and tell anyone about their country when in most cases I haven't even, been there. I've only been, I don't know how many countries I've been to, but it's not about that. It's about, I don't know the culture of all different countries. So I'd say if I was selling internationally, if I was selling from, Sri Lanka into other companies or Sri Lankan companies, or I was selling from the US into Sri Lanka, I would defer to hiring local and understanding their customs. I would not translate templates. I would not, one of the most advantageous things I did when I was running international teams is I hired local and I asked them about their customs, and then I shut up for a long time and learned about their buying process and didn't just simply jam in templates that were translated into Japanese, for instance. I'm wondering if one of the reps that I worked with is probably watching this. I hope that she is. But essentially, if I was selling internationally, I would just think through the customs and I would defer to someone who is from there, lived there for a long time, and understands the buying community and what customs are appropriate. They change based on every nation very, very drastically. This is coming from a leader who had to lead in several different geos. And I was shocked about how the buying process just in general. Some people were never on LinkedIn and only viewed Facebook as a business platform. So, very, very different from country to country. So I'd start thinking that through. And then the last one that I wouldn't say you have to do personalization, you might think about if the strategy is appropriate, is if you're working for a very well-known label and it's just easier for you to have a conversation. Shout out LinkedIn. I've heard of LinkedIn reps who were just absolutely killing it, and then they went to another SMB company or mid-market company, and all of a sudden they're like, why am I at 10% of quota? And the difference was they were the same level of skill. They were just trained in an environment where everyone knows LinkedIn and loves welcoming LinkedIn in the door because they love the brand. And so it's less about the selling ability in a lot of case scenarios. So if I had a very, very well-known label and very liked label that it's like, ooh, Uber's here kind of thing, then I would start, thinking about like, okay, do I need to go to the level of personalization? But that should actually be clipped up by point number 1. If you're already getting the results you need for whatever reason, whether that's label, etc., then you don't need your girl here. So in summary, most case scenarios, I do believe that personalization, the results are just there. However, there are quite a few options whenever, I would stick to just relevance. And so I hope that this was helpful and gives you some level of background that I don't say personalization in every case. There are a lot of case scenarios. So I think the takeaway here is think always about this kind of content in terms of what makes sense to you, what makes sense to your business, tease out the gold, leave out the rest, and get on with your day. So that is everything for this session. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session, you want to see more just like it, if you go to flipthescript.co, I go through a bunch of different sessions on everything from sales to SDR to sales enablement to sales operations to anything that has the word sell in it. If you really like this session, if you go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, go ahead and tag Flip the Script, me, and your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.